Hello, I'm Bri Allison with the Power of the Patient Project, and welcome to our segment, Tell Us Your Story. Today we are joined by Mrs. Lousin Mehrabi. Mrs. Mehrabi is a world-renowned professional negotiator, trainer, and inspirational speaker. Aside from being one of the most influential negotiation professionals, she is a mother of Alex, 11 years old, who has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, also known as DMD. Within the last year, Mrs. Mehrabi has been sharing her family's story to inspire others who may be going through a similar situation. Mrs. Mehrabi, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So to start off the interview, can you explain to us what DMD is and talk about your journey to Alex's diagnosis?
Sure. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a condition that affects the muscles of patients. And research shows that it's not only muscles that are affected, but the entire system. So bones get affected, the brain gets affected. Many children with Duchenne have also brain issues, meaning learning difficulties, behavior issues. It's a very vast thing, and it's also progressive. So it starts with one part of the body and then another part and another part and another part. Until today, it's 100% fatal. So there is no cure yet, which means that patients die relatively young. The average life expectancy today is around 20-25 years old.
And how did you get to Alex's diagnosis?
So Alex's birth was very complicated. Doctors had to intervene. When he came out, he wasn't breathing properly, reacting properly. So they had to rush him into the intensive care. So he spent the first 2 weeks of his life in the hospital, in coma first, and then at the pediatric department. So when we left the hospital, ever since that moment, I was always like extra careful watching him, the way he grows, what he does, just to be sure that there weren't any consequences from that period in coma. Because as a mom, and he was my first child, I had no experience. I was always afraid that there might have been side effect of that coma or an impact on his brain. So I was carefully looking at the way he developed, and he was developing as other children, but a little bit slower. So he started walking around 1.5 years, which is a bit late, but not alarmingly late. And also his behavior was difficult. He tended to be quite moody. He didn't want to walk that much. He didn't want to run much. So I knocked on doctors' doors saying, maybe there is a consequence of the coma, maybe something went wrong. And they did an MRI scan and they said, no, everything is perfectly fine. But I felt, call it mother instinct, that something was wrong with him, but I didn't know what. And Duchenne is a muscular dystrophy, which is genetic. So it can run in the family, but it didn't run in my family. And honestly, I'd never heard of muscular dystrophy in my life. So I simply didn't think of that. I was more thinking something with the brain. Anyway, I knocked on many doctors' doors for years, until at one point it even became problematic between me and my husband, with my husband telling me, maybe you're the problem. There's nothing wrong with the kid, just leave him alone. And I started doubting myself as well, thinking, am I just imagining this? But I just felt something is wrong with him. Until finally, at the age of 5, we went to see a neurologist saying, is it normal that he doesn't like to run? Is it normal that he falls often? Is it normal that he doesn't want to jump like other boys his age? And she made him do something very simple. She put him on the floor and said, stand up without using your hands. And he couldn't. And he did a certain movement that I now know is called the Gowers movement, where you use your hand and feet to stand up. And that was for her a sign of saying, let's analyze muscular dystrophy. So from then on, we did a blood test, we did another MRI, we did muscle biopsy, genetic testing. And that's when he, right after his 6th birthday, was finally diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So we finally knew that A, there was something wrong, something severely wrong, and B, what it was.
Well, it's a good thing that you were persistent then, because you really helped him out.
Absolutely. And obviously with this disease, just like with any other condition, the earlier the diagnosis, the better, because then you can actually do something about it. And unfortunately, yeah, I wasn't taken very seriously by the medical staff. So his diagnosis came relatively late. In average, children with Duchenne are diagnosed around the age of 4.
Oh, wow. And after all of this, what went through your mind about learning about Alex's diagnosis and how did you process it?
I remember going on Google, obviously what the doctors tell you not to do and what everybody does. And I read a neurologist writing there is a life before and a life after Duchenne. And I didn't really understand what that meant until we got the official diagnosis. And I knew that, okay, right now I have a 6-year-old who can walk, run, jump, do everything. But slowly he's going to lose all of that. And within a few years, he's going to be in a wheelchair. With 2 years more, he's not even going to be able to eat alone. And then he's not going to be able to breathe properly. And he's going to need a mask at night. And then he's going to need a tube. And if I'm lucky to still have him when he's in his 20s, he's going to be in a wheelchair, not being able to do much. And that obviously tears your world apart, like the world crumbles. And I thought I couldn't handle it. I thought, I'm not that type of mom. I always thought of special need moms as kind of superheroes. Like, how on earth do they do it? I could never do that. And that's what I thought. I just can't do it. Like, God made a mistake, gave it to the wrong mom, like the wrong problem to the wrong person. I just can't do this. And yeah, for several months, I thought, I just I'm not the right person. I can't handle this. I cannot watch my child deteriorate and then die, and knowing that there is just no cure. And we just have to hope that science advances and finds something while he's alive. Yeah, my first thought was simply, I can't handle this.
I can't imagine what you went through in that moment. So you're inspirational. And how have your family's lives changed since then?
Well, the period where we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what yet, was for me the hardest. Because once we had the diagnosis, there was a name to it. There was a prognosis. We kind of knew what we had to expect. And then for me, it was action time. It was, okay, now we know, what are we going to do? I tend to go in action when in times of crisis. So I thought, okay, what do we do? And the day of the diagnosis, we were living in France in a little city right outside of Paris, which is very uphill. So up, down, up, down. And I thought, oh my God, how are we going to do that here in a wheelchair? It's simply impossible. And the city of Paris is also really not adapted for a wheelchair. So I asked the neurologist, I said, what can we do? I mean, what do you do now? You're telling us there's nothing we can do. There must be something. And she said, there's nothing you can do to make him better. There's nothing you can do to make this go away. But what would be very beneficial for him are 3 things. That is physiotherapy, swimming, and the sun. And when she said that, I thought about my last holiday, which was in Dubai. And I thought, in Dubai, I'm sure they have good physiotherapists. There's the sun all year long and we can swim all year long. So I told my husband, let's move to Dubai. And he thought I was completely nuts, in shock. He's like, what do you mean, let's move to Dubai? I said, let's move to Dubai. He can still walk a few more years. In the medical world, they call it the honeymoon years, until the age of 10, 11, where the children are full-time in a wheelchair. So I said, he can still walk a few more years. Let's just go to Dubai, give him the best life possible, create memories, go to Ferrari world, I don't know, and do all the things that a young boy loves. Because Duchenne is going to take away a lot from us, but nobody can take away the memories that we make, the pictures, the videos, the laughter. So I thought he thought I was crazy. So I gave him some time to digest the news. And then, after a while we decided together, we're going to do this. We're going to move to Dubai, despite, everybody advising us against it, family, friends, the neurologist. We decided to go anywhere. So 3 months later, we were in Dubai looking for a house, for a school, for new cars and everything, and start a new life.
And are you happy with your decision to move to Dubai?
Absolutely. I never, ever regretted it. The first 2 years were very difficult. I mean, new country, new ways of doing, expensive. Dubai is very expensive. I didn't have a job, obviously. I stopped working so that I could take care of him. So I launched my activity here. In the beginning, wasn't easy, just like everything. My husband's job wasn't going super well the first year. So the first year and a half were really tough. But then his job picked up, my activity became really successful. So we were able to afford living in Dubai. The children adapted super well. His school was extremely helpful. We found new friends, and yeah, life became absolutely fantastic. And I'm very, very, very happy I listened to that second time of mother instinct and made that decision.
Well, it sounds like it was the best decision for you guys, so I'm happy that everything is going well.
Thank you.
And how have you helped Alex process and learn more about his disease?
Well, I believe a lot in transparency, and I believe that children pick up way more than we give them credit for. So we decided to be transparent from the beginning. So the same day we got the diagnosis, I went to his bed. It was in the evening, and I said, I brought it to him as kind of good news. I said, you know, the reason why you get tired from running so much and why you prefer sitting instead of walking, we finally know why. And it's actually not your fault. And there is a reason you're different than the other children in your class. It's because there's a little problem with your muscles. And now we finally know, so you can rest as much as you want. You don't have to run anymore. And everybody's here to help you. And we're going to buy you a nice, beautiful, buggy where you can sit in, and cars that you can drive around, and you can just keep those little wheels on the bike, and it's all okay. And if you need help, we can all help you, and we're here, and you're going to get physiotherapy to help you with your muscles, and the school is going to help you. So we finally know what it is. And then I told him, I said, babe, everybody has a challenge in life that they have to face and that they have to carry. And this one is yours to face. It's Duchenne, and doctors are working really, really hard to find a cure. And until then, this is your life challenge, and this is something that you have to face, and we are here to help you.
I think that was a beautiful way of talking to him about it. And he probably had a little bit of a relief knowing that it wasn't something that he was doing.
I think so, because I think there was a part of him that felt that he was different, but he didn't know why, or that maybe he felt like he was clumsy, or that he was dumb, or I don't know what children can tell themselves. I mean, he was only 6. And I did notice that his behavior improved after that. So I think, yeah, it made sense. I mean, obviously he was only 6, so I wasn't going to tell him this is fatal. There's nothing you can do. You're going to die. Like, I didn't say that. But I told him whatever I thought a 6-year-old could comprehend. And what was beautiful was that my best friend, he is obese. He's very big and fat. And he was at our place because he helped me process the diagnosis. And we were sitting in the garden the next day, and he was telling me about an operation that he was considering to do a stomach reduction, because he just tried everything to lose weight and he couldn't. And then Alex, out of nowhere, says, yeah, you're really fat, aren't you? Well, that's your life challenge. Everybody has a life challenge. So then I realized, okay, it did, he did process it yesterday, what I was telling him.
Wow. And so how's Alex's health doing today?
So today he's 11, 11 and a half. He is in a wheelchair. He cannot walk anymore. He cannot stand anymore. There's a lot of atrophy, meaning his muscles have broken down. I noticed that his upper body is starting to become weak as well. So he has difficulties even lifting a glass of water. So we bought like very light glasses. Soon we're going to need to work with straws. So yeah, we built a lift in the house. So we're very fortunate to be able to do that. So he can still go up and down. He has an electric wheelchair now. We have a manual wheelchair, and we have a lot of tools to help us help him. So yeah, that is the life at the moment, and we're enjoying it as much as we can until the next phase comes.
Taking it day by day.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, physically, that's the situation. Emotionally, he's extremely strong. He's very wise. I always say he must have a very deep soul, because he just understands things better than I do. But when he lost the capacity to walk, that was last November, So November 2021. I did notice that he became really sad. I noticed for the first time that he was really grieving this loss. So that's when we sent him to see a psychologist so that he could also express his emotions and talk and regulate. And she told us that maybe it was time to tell him the ugly truth of this disease. And we agreed. I mean, I didn't want him to go on Google and find out. So that was the hardest decision of my life. I mean, as you know, as a negotiator, difficult decisions, difficult negotiations, difficult conversations are part of my day to day. But this one felt really tough. Like, how on earth do you tell your child that he's dying? How do you tell your child that there's nothing you can do? How do you tell your child that it's going to get worse? So I'm not gonna hide, I was crying for a week preparing for that conversation, like in my car and driving around thinking, how am I gonna say this? But yeah, we had to tell him. So we did. We prepared a calm moment, went in the garden, made sure our daughter wasn't there to disturb. And we said, honey, we have to tell you something. And we just want you to know that you can come to us if you have any questions about Duchenne. And do you have any questions? Do you understand what Duchenne is? So we started asking a lot of questions to understand what is his way of thinking. Because the psychologist had told us that he thinks that it's his fault that he can't walk, like there is a problem, he can't monitor his legs anymore and he's doing something wrong. So I wanted to reassure him that it wasn't his fault. So explain that Duchenne is breaking down his muscles, that the muscle that is broken doesn't rebuild back in his body anymore. And that's what Duchenne does, and that doctors are still working very hard to find something, but that right now there is no cure yet. Now, I refuse to tell him that it's fatal and he's going to die from this, because again, a cure can be found tomorrow. We don't know that. And who am I to take away hope? So I told him it's severe, it's getting worse, it's not his fault, and he can come to us and talk about anything he wants, and he can continue to see the psychologist if he wants to, and if he has any questions, we're always there. And again, it was actually a beautiful moment. It seemed like he kind of already knew. I don't know if he had Googled it before or not, but he seemed very calm about it, and he asked a few questions, and I shared with him the cycle of grief and what that means, and that it's totally normal to be sad, and that he was grieving the capacity to walk, and that we were all grieving that, and that we could do that together, and that when you share sadness, it becomes less. So yeah, we actually had a beautiful conversation about that. And again, his behavior after that improved. I think because he could just understand better what's happening. And yeah, his behavior is challenging because, again, affected by Duchenne, it goes up and down. And right now we're in a good phase. His behavior is good. So again, enjoying that as long as it lasts.
Well, he's blessed to have parents like you guys that are so open and honest with him and all going through this together. So how do you stay positive while on this journey, and how do you keep Alex positive?
Well, there's been a thing in my life. So I was born in a war zone. I was born in a country at war. And we left, and I left, and I lived in a refugee camp when I was a young child. And I always felt very lucky. That is the right word. It's not grateful, because that's something I learned about later. It's lucky. I felt lucky that my parents decided to get me out of that country, whereas all my cousins and friends were still living there. And then I was lucky to grow up in the Netherlands, where I was lucky to be able to go to university while my parents didn't have much money. And then I was lucky that I found the right job. So I always felt like I was lucky. And therefore, I guess there is this sense of gratitude that I've always had. And it's only now that I've learned about the power of gratitude that I always felt. I always felt like it could be so much worse, because I've seen so much worse. So I guess with Duchenne, it's the same thing. Of course, in the beginning, you go through the same self-pity, like everybody, and that's normal. Like, oh my God, why me? Why my child? Well, this disease, why not something else? Why there is no cure, etc., etc. And once you go through that grief, you come out, and for me, I said, wait a second, okay, we have this, but we also have another child who is healthy. We have the intellectual capacity to understand what this means. We have the languages to be able to do research in different languages and understand, where are the medical doctors. We have some financial means to provide him with a wheelchair and whatever he needs. That is already more than a lot of parents. Everywhere in the world, there are children with Duchenne living in very poor countries where they can't even afford a wheelchair. So these children are sitting in the corner of a house, not moving anymore. Or they can't afford physiotherapy. So the decline is even faster, where they can't afford to take the child to a swimming pool. So, you know what I mean? It can be worse. There are parents who have 2 children with Duchenne. There are parents who have 3 children with Duchenne. So I consider myself lucky for all the things that I just said. And I just compared that it can always be worse. That doesn't mean I don't give recognition for the suffering that I go through. And sometimes I'm sad and I just allow myself to cry. But I do know it could be worse. So I'm just focusing on the things that I'm grateful for, that we're lucky with, that we're blessed with. And by being focused on that, honestly, it's just so much that, yeah, that's how I stay positive. And that's what I teach him as well. I say, boy, there are children born in India, born in Africa, who have absolutely no money to go to the physiotherapist, who can't afford all the stuff that you have, who can't even go to school anymore because schools are not adapted, who have to learn at home while they don't want to. So we are lucky. And that's what I put in his head as well. I said, you are extremely lucky. So yes, you have Duchenne. Yes, that's horrible. Yes, that's a severe condition. And at the same time, you're also lucky to have this wonderful life. And also, whenever we can celebrate something that we have because of Duchenne, we do. For example, when we travel, we try to travel as much as we can. And now that he's in a wheelchair, we can skip the line and, with check-in and everything. So I'm like, woohoo, thanks to you, we can skip the line. So I transform everything in a party. So yeah, that's how we stay positive.
Well, that's a great mindset to have and to live your life by.
Yeah.
So how has your experience as a negotiator helped you better navigate Alex's medical journey, specifically in terms of communicating with medical professionals?
Well, that is a journey. And one day I promised myself, I'm going to make a negotiation course for parents with sick children, because my God, do you need to negotiate with the medical staff? And also, I also help the medical staff. I give conferences, I give trainings to hospitals, to clinics, to help them negotiate with their patients. So I'm on both sides and helping everybody that I can, because it is a negotiation. And the problem is that people don't even realize it's a negotiation. People think it's a conversation. But in a conversation where there is a disagreement, that becomes a negotiation. So there are constant negotiations between patients and the medical staff. And both parties need negotiation skills to come to an agreement peacefully, without too much stress, without too much drama and crisis situations. So being a professional negotiator, knowing negotiation skills, has helped me keep the situation always calm. And whenever there is a disagreement, immediately go to, number one question we ask when we go on a negotiation table is, who is the decision maker? Who is the negotiator? And whether doctors realize it or not, as medical staff, they are advisors. They recommend a treatment, but the decision maker is the patient. Some doctors tend to forget that, but it's true. If the patient doesn't want to take the treatment, he or she is not going to take the treatment. And if you are lucky as a medical doctor to have built a strong bond and relationship with that patient, then you are lucky that the patient is actually going to tell you that they're not going to take the treatment. Whereas in most of the cases, that's not true. Research shows that the non-compliance of patients is between 60 and 80% of non-compliance. That means patients are not taking the treatment as they should, as long as they should, with the doses that they should, without telling their doctor. So that is extremely high, and that is extremely serious, because as a doctor, how do you want to help your patient if you don't know that they're not taking the treatment that you recommended them to take? So this is the issue, and and I'm trying to help as much as I can to bring that non-compliance rate down, but also improve the relationship between patients and doctors. So enough about my work, back to me as a patient. I've had many times, doctors recommend something that I didn't necessarily want to give to Alex, or different doctors advising different things, and then having to make difficult decisions. And yeah, there was one situation where a doctor, we had to start the treatment, and the doctor said, before you start the treatment, I want you to give another drug first. And we didn't agree with that because the side effect / advantage rate was just not in our favor. So we said, no, we don't want that treatment, but we do want to start this drug. And it wasn't something that was mandatory. And so I talked to another doctor who said, no, you don't have to give that drug if you don't want to. But this doctor really, really insisted on me giving that drug. And I didn't want to because of the side effects and the risks. So I very calmly told him, I said, doctor, who is the decision maker on this process? Who is the decision maker having to decide if we're going to give that drug or not? And he said, you are. And I said, okay, decision taken. Can we move forward? So just like that, I just prevented an argument because I just showed him that you're here to recommend, I'm here to decide, decision done, let's move forward. Now, I don't think he appreciated it, but it's the way it is.
Well, that's definitely a new perspective, and I never really thought about it that way, but very true.
Yeah, so depending on the doctor, the status, the ego, the country, the way we see doctors and the authority that the doctor attributes to himself or herself or is given through the community makes it that they realize or not that they are here to help, that they are here to advise, but they can't force anything that the patient doesn't want. And that is universal in any country in the world. Of course, they can say, if you don't do as I tell you, then you don't have to come back to my clinic. Then the patient can go and find another doctor. So in the end, it's the patient who decides. And I think it's very important that we all realize that. The patients, the parents of the patients, and the doctors.
Yeah, that is very important information for all of us to keep in mind. And what's something that you wish everyone knew about DMD, and what advice do you have for those going through a similar situation?
Okay, so I wish, of course, the world would know about Duchenne so that parents, when they see symptoms that could indicate that, can go to their doctor and say, I want him or her checked on Duchenne, because although it's a genetic condition, 1/3 is a random mutation, meaning it can happen to anybody. I am not a carrier of this disease. We don't have it in the family. So this was a random mutation. Alex is the first in the family line. So it's very important that people realize this is a genetic condition, but it can happen to anyone. That's one. Two, I want parents of healthy children to teach their children that other children who have special needs, be it blind, deaf, physical, whatever it is, they are still children with the same need to play and to have friends. So please send your children to those children and, ask them if they want to be friends, if they want to play, and adapt whatever it is that they're doing towards their needs, because in the end, they're still children and they still have the same needs. And I want the medical staff to know that patients with special needs and their families often feel extremely alone. Although you see them the entire day, they are not sitting with other patients the entire day. So all of your patients by moment feel extremely alone. So when they come to you, it's not only to help them with the treatment, it's also to be a listening ear. It's also to be a person of support. So try to be slightly more than just giving drugs or telling them that there's not much you can do, and try to be as human as possible. Although it's extremely difficult to deliver bad news, although the pressure of having all the patients and the weight on your shoulders, I can totally relate to that. But please try to be as human as you can be. Have at least a tissue box on your table, because that can be useful.
That is great advice. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And that concludes our interview for today. Again, Mrs. Mehrabi, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your family's story. We appreciate the work that you are doing to spread awareness about DMD and patient advocacy, and you and Alex are truly an inspiration, and we hope the very best for him and the rest of your family.
Thank you. You're very welcome, and thank you for doing this work. It's amazing and very much needed.
We're happy to talk to you. And if you're interested in telling your story to us, please reach out with your name and email address to set up an interview. Email me at powerofpatient@gmail.com. I'm Bri Allison for the Power of the Patient Project, the National Library of Patient Rights and Advocacy. Thank you for watching.